I'm using this modern gas station kit to build a customized scene for my model railroad layout, and I'm starting right now. Hi, I'm Ron of Ron's Trains and Things, and today I'm working on a piece of a street scene in the Saginaw, Texas area of my layout. Now, many times a non-rail served area on the layout can add interest to the layout. It gives the eyes a little bit of a pattern interrupt from the trains on the track. It gives them a little bit of break in order for your mind to process the rest of the layout. And it makes the layout just seem larger. Well, this street scene in Saginaw is intended to do exactly that, and it's going to contain a number of restaurants and other businesses as well as this gas station. I think this is going to be a really fun build, so let's head on over to the workbench and get started. This video is brought to you by Midwest Model Railroad. With 15,000 square feet of inventory and one-day shipping, whether in person or online, they are your one-stop model railroad shop. MidwestModelRR.com, link in the description. The basis of this scene is this in-scale modern shell gas station from Summit Customcuts. This same kit is available in HO scale as well. I've built other kits from this supplier before, and I've had good experiences, so I thought this would be a great addition to my Saginaw, Texas scene. If you're interested in this or other models from Summit, I'll provide a link to their site in the description below. This video, however, is not sponsored by them, nor do I have any affiliate relationship with them. The kit consists of milled styrene parts. It comes with pretty clear instructions, and most of the construction is pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to narrate every step in the building process of the structure. Rather, I'm going to highlight some things that you should know about it and tell you how I modified it, detailed it, and built the scratch-built parking area. The convenience store portion of the kit has milled finger joints for corners. I used this magnetic gluing jig to hold them square as I glued them, and I glued all of the styrene joints in this project using solvent cement. The corners make good, strong joints, but the finger joints are visible, so I will work with that issue a little bit later. I should point out that the floor and the roof are nearly identical, but the roof is slightly larger. Do not get them mixed up or you'll have a serious problem later. When using solvent cement on my cutting mat, I like to work on some waxed paper or parchment paper, as it's very possible to cement your project right to the cutting mat. I also love using a variety of sizes of clothespins as clamps. You can never have too many. On this model, I'm leaving the roof just press fit into place, but unglued, as I may add more interior details and lighting at a later time. With the basic store structure assembled, I turn to the pump canopy. This is where I must give you some advice. On all Summit Custom Cut kits that I have built, the fit tolerances are rather tight, which is a good thing. On this kit, however, they are extremely tight. The canopy uses notch and tab type construction, and the notches are so tight that you must sand the tabs to thin them a bit, or you will break the tops out of the notches. I broke 2 of the notches on this kit. Fortunately, I was able to cement them back together, but to avoid the problem, sand the tabs a little thinner. After the canopy was assembled, I used some Tamiya white putty to fill the divots in the canopy notches and the finger joints on the structure corners. I've used several different brands of filler putty over the years, but Tamiya is one of my favorite that's on the market today. If you'd like to try it out, I'll post a link to it in my Amazon Pick of the Week in the description down below this video. I use a number 17 chisel blade in my utility knife as a trowel to apply the putty to the small areas. I tried to get it as smooth as possible without overworking it. After the putty had dried overnight, I sanded it flat and smooth. Next, I worked on the gas pumps themselves. These are challenging simply because the parts are so small. Again, the holes where the parts fit together had to be reamed slightly to allow a reasonable fit without breakage. I also assembled the canopy support posts into the gas pump bases at this time. Turning back to the canopy, it includes these decorative 3D strips around the perimeter. These mount right over the top of the assembly slots that we used earlier. There is a gap on each of the long sides where the Shell logo goes, but the instructions tell you exactly where to leave the gap. When all of this was assembled, I masked the inside of the store structure, then I taped it, the canopy, canopy supports, pumps, and the sign to a piece of cardboard for painting. I initially painted everything with a gray primer per the instructions. I thought this would be a good color for the gray detail areas on the model, but it was a little too dark, so I ended up lightening those sections later with some lighter gray paint. I thought the canopy lacked some needed detail, so I cut these plastruck styrene trusses and channel joints for a support structure. I sanded away some of the paint for the adhesive joints and glued them in place. I masked the lowest portion of the canopy sides that would remain gray using automotive pinstriping tape. I burnished the edges down with a curved edge of some hobby tweezers. Here's where I made a mistake. I usually seal tape like this with some clear coat and let it dry before painting. This helps to seal down the tape joints, but I forgot to do that on this model, and boy did I pay for that mistake later, as you will see. I painted the canopy sides yellow, then when that had dried, I taped off the top portion so I could paint the raised strips red. I also masked the bottom of the street sign, the base of the convenience store, and the bases of the canopy supports so these could be painted white along with the gas pumps. Removing the masking tape revealed the paint job. The Shell logos for the canopy I had painted red. I then brush painted the connectors between them yellow so they would blend in with the canopy itself. Here you see the issue that I had because I forgot to seal my masking tape. I worked hard in several passes to touch up the issue. The final results were not perfect by any means, but they were passable. It'll definitely pass the 3-foot test anyway. The material supplied for window glazing is nice and clear, but it's very thick acrylic. I considered using some thinner glazing material in its place, but decided to go ahead and use this since it was already cut to the right size. I glued it in place using canopy glue and clamped it with the clothespin clamps. I glued the Shell logos onto the canopy. I think some weathering always enhances a structure model, especially on the horizontal surfaces. So I weathered the canopy top with a medium gray acrylic wash, then a bit of rust color, especially in the corners, but I tried hard not to overdo the weathering effect. In this model, the window and door frames are friction fit and they are put in after the glazing is installed. I prepped these parts and airbrushed them black. When they had dried, I pressed them into place. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this video and want to see more model railroad tips, tools, and techniques, why not subscribe down below and click the little bell icon so you can catch future videos. I had some rooftop details on hand, including this air conditioning unit. I used a black wash to highlight the details and to weather it lightly, then sanded away some paint and glued it in place with some CA. I don't often use CA on models like this, but when gluing dissimilar materials like this metal to plastic application, it is sometimes the best option. When that had dried, I weathered the roof with some gray and black washes. Again, adjustment was necessary when installing the canopy supports. I had to ream the holes in order to allow the support posts to fit in properly. The decals for this and other Summit Custom Cut kits are self-adhesive peel and stick, printed on Avery paper. Per suggestion of the instructions, I sprayed the decals with a clear sealer before applying them and let it dry completely. These decals are extremely easy to apply. Even the tiny ones on the gas pumps went on pretty easily. The pump hoses are made from insulated wire. I made the mistake of mounting the pumps on the canopy assembly before I remembered to install the hoses, which made my installation a little tricky, but not terrible, and they came out looking great. Having measured the space I wanted to fill with this scene, I cut the parking lot pavement from 40 thousandths styrene. I made some adjustments to this as I went along, which you will see. I laid out where I wanted the model to fit onto the lot, then began sketching out the entryways. I removed most of the material from these islands around the entryways with a nibbler. These areas will be filled with grass and some shrubs eventually. I then sanded and filed away the remaining material to shape these islands. I also sanded the entryways down to a slight taper. I sanded the entire parking lot in one direction with 600 grit sandpaper to create some concrete surface texture, and I masked off the gluing surfaces for the canopy and the store. You see here that I decided to remove the excess concrete from the sides of the store. I then painted the entire lot a base color of gray. I should have thought of this earlier, but I wanted to include some expansion joints, so I measured these out and scribed them into the plastic with a couple of light passes with the back edge of a number 11 hobby knife blade. I sanded the paint again lightly with 600 grit sandpaper to enhance the texture that I had created before and to remove any burrs from this scribing process. When it was time for weathering, I wet the entire surface and applied an aged concrete colored wash first to begin creating a mottled look to the surface. I applied this color in a couple of stages. I then wet sanded it very lightly with 600 grit sandpaper to blend it a bit. When that had dried, I applied an India ink wash to bring out the details, which was nearly disastrous. I had to apply several passes of IPA to wash down and tone down the ink until I finally got the effect that I wanted. When this dried, I was pretty happy with the way things were looking. I scraped away a fine line of paint from the edges where the curbing would be installed. The curb is 40 thousandths quarter round painted yellow. I attached one end with solvent cement and let that cure well. Then began wrapping the curb around the perimeter and cementing it in place as I went. I repeated this process for all three islands. I love how there are many places today to get 3D printed detail parts. I got these weathered graffiti dumpsters from my friend Tim at the YouTube channel They Make It Like That. He sells a lot of detail parts on his Etsy store, and I'll link both his channel and his store in the description down below this video. For the dumpster, I needed a pad to set it on, so as an afterthought, I scabbed this piece onto the edge of the lot, weathering it before cementing it in place. I needed sidewalks around the store, so I used evergreen tile sheet 1/3 inch square, which is 4 feet in N-scale, perfect for sidewalks. I cut them to length, sanded them again lightly to add texture, painted them gray, and weathered them lightly with the same aged concrete that I used before, and a pin wash of black to bring out the expansion joints. I had sanded away the paint where the sidewalks would attach. I then removed all of the masking, cemented the front sidewalk in place, attached the store with canopy glue, in case I ever want to remove it for further detailing, then attached the other sidewalks around the edges of the store. I attached the canopy to the base and touched up any exposed plastic around that perimeter. I installed one car filling up at the gas pump, attaching it with canopy glue. I had drilled a small hole in the car's filler cap and attached the gas hose from the pump into it. I also had a figure that I had modified and painted to attach as the person filling up the car. Again, I attached him with canopy glue. I got these pallets from another 3D detail printer, this time Eric. His YouTube channel is IMRRO.com, and his store is Wild Hair Limited. Again, you'll find links to both of those in the description down below. I weathered the pallets a bit and stacked them up behind the store. And with that, the scene is complete for now. I plan to add a scratch-built air machine and a car and person airing up a tire, another car getting gas, parking bumpers and lines to the one side of the parking lot, a couple more cars, and a few more figures. But all of these details will be included in a later video. To see more structure builds and other model railroad content, check out the links on your screen. Don't forget all of those links that I mentioned in the description down below, and join me on Fridays as I bring you even more great model railroad videos, and I'll see you on the next video. 10, Lizzie?